Several weeks ago, when Pastor Larry phoned me and said, "Are you able? Are you available to preach?" This particular weekend, he asked me, said, "We're speaking on we're working on the Book of Acts. That's our series." And I thought about that for about 1 second maybe, because of course, as many of you know, I'm fascinated by history. History is what I eat and breathe. Updating on eat it. And Acts is just that. It's a history of the church. Within the Book of Acts, we find basically beginnings of everything that we proclaim now, and the beginnings of the churches that we spread around the world. And so, as I said, in the history thing, that's I'm right home with that. I love history, so of course, preaching dramatics, you got it. That's it. But within the Book of Acts, there are a number of narratives that really stand out, even more so than the rest of the book. They're like beacons that are shine. You could probably name some of them. Pentecost, obviously, is one of those, which last week was Pentecost. Another one, Peter going to the house of Cornelius, where we see the first real gathering of Gentiles. The conversion of Paul is obviously one of them. And those are just some of those kinds of books. And I'm fascinated by one in particular. And really, it's a short description in many ways of Paul's adventures. But that more than that, I realize that it has as powerful message for me, resonates for me. And so that's what we're going to be speaking about today. And that's out of Acts 16 that we're going to consider. Acts 16 is a story of faith, but the images that makes an expected faith that accomplishes something for the kingdom of God, a faith that serves God. And so I'd ask you to nurture with me into that chapter today. By the way, I'm not going to read the whole chapter to you. I'm only going to pick certain sections to look at, and I'm going to summarize a few parts as well. So what I would suggest to you is that when you get an opportunity, hopefully not during a message, another time, you read through the whole the whole chapter 16 and then sort of pick up some of the things that I don't have time to really touch on. And by the way, I know I talked on the Acts 16 a little bit for Alice, but I think it's still worth revisiting. So if you remember some of those times, please forgive me and just join me again in looking at it. When we read all about what Paul had done, it's sometimes easy to forget that, and the other apostles as well. It's sometimes easy to forget that Paul and Silas and the others who went with them were normal human beings like us, and that this is their history. And it's important that we begin by remembering that. You see, if in our thinking we only see Acts as some sorts of stories or legends that really they have no relevance to us. They're just stories and legends. And we're used to fiction, where we see fiction and stories all around us, all of a sudden. But if that's all we see them as, then why bother even reading about them? Because there's nothing there for us. On the other hand, we have to be aware that we cannot see these people as being somehow super apostles. That we might, because if we do that, if we see them as too big, then there can be no expectations of us to ever live up to them. There can be no expectations that we can ever accomplish anything they've accomplished. We can anyway, but the point being that doesn't excuse us from doing anything. Is my point. We still have to do things. So whenever we read about Paul and Silas, St. Barnabas, and any of these, we must remember that they are just human beings. They felt joy, they felt pain, they had good times and bad times, they had times of suffering. They experienced a long experience of emotions that we and most other people around us walk on this earth do. Love, fear, hope, despair, all of those things that we are familiar with. So it's often useful when we come to look at a chapter like this, that in a sense we close our eyes. If you have to do it in real life, that's true. You go ahead and do that. But Martella, just remember you're supposed to open them up again afterwards. No, let's speed. We just might. You know, in a sense, we close our eyes and we walk in their sandals with them and see it as though it is us watching there. And for me, this is one of those terms. Okay. So through Acts 16, 6-10, we have this fascinating story of how Paul and Silas tried, in essence, to go east to spread the gospel. Okay? And this is what would have been known as is the Roman province of Asia. Roman chose they had different provinces. This province of Asia would be the section that today we call Asia Minor, actually. In many ways, I'd understand why Paul would have wanted to go there. I think you would too, if you think about it. It was comfortable for him. Asia was all turf place. That was where he grew up. That's where his life was. He knew the general language that was spoken there, which was Greek. Further over the centuries, many Jews had traveled from Judea to that area, and they lived there. In fact, some of them were still there from the exile from the Babylonian exile. And because they were there, he could follow his usual pattern that we see in Acts, where first he goes to the Jews and he provides to them, and then and after some of them to back to the he then masked and goes to the Gentiles. So he could do that in Asia. But God is a different planet. God had different plans for him. And so we pick up back 16 verses 6-8. Paul and his companions traveled throughout the region of Phrygia and Galatia, having been kept by the Holy Spirit, preaching the word in the province of Asia. When they came to the border of Mysia, they tried to enter Bithynia, but the Spirit of Jesus would not allow her to, so they passed by Mysia and went down to Troas. Fascinating. The Holy Spirit was not allowed Paul to continue. From elsewhere, we know that Paul always planned ahead. He had, good head about how things to do it. You understand that kind of concept for you, and you sit down and take a piece of paper and you figure out exactly where you're holding the count, that type of thing. And it appears that's what Paul was doing. But it also is clear that he was submissive to God's will at any time, that God's will was made plain to him. And we're not exactly told how the Spirit stopped him, but he did. The Spirit did stop him. And for me, this raises the question of how would the Spirit talk to Paul? And to how he relates on instinct to God. How do you Paul know? And that's important to us, because when we ask that question about ourselves too, about how do we know? How do we know when God is trying to tell us? How do we know when the Spirit's trying to touch us? Are we blessed by some prophecy or vision or dream as Paul was? Some of us do have those things. Does God talk through someone else to us, some other person that we know we trust him, and his word is good? Does he talk through them to us? Maybe as we set out obstacles show up in our paths and change directions that we haven't planned. I've heard people talk of what they call a check in our spirit, something check until it feel right. These are awful ways they call it speaks. We know we should be helpful with Paul. Just a little story, just to show you what I'm talking about. Even the check in the spirit thing. I was once, I remember coming home, I was at the church, so me something, and I don't remember exactly what it was, but I was going a little late. And I remember going in the door, and I said to myself, oh, good, and just take a few minutes to breathe it all over that. And the phone rang. And it was a call from the hospital across the way from us. And they had somebody there, a family there, that the father was dying, and they wanted somebody to come and be with them. Of course, that was part of my deal with that, was like the comments to belong to me to us when they didn't hurt. So I did it. I headed over. You can match with the enthusiasm I kept. Well, that he older. It's never good. It's never a joyful moment to be watching those kind of situations. So I went in, spent a little time with them, prayed, get the prayer of commendation. This was the father who was in his last hours. And thinking, okay, there we are, done. Headed out the door, going home to sleep. I didn't get 3 steps out of the hall. It was like I heard a voice saying, not enough, my friend, not nearly. And I thought, okay. When I turned around, I went back in. And I spent another close to an hour as the family talking, praying, sometimes about things that go out and whatever. As I walked out the door after that, I was rejuvenated, or energized. I came out the door energized. God does speak to us. The question is, can we listen? That's the question. I must admit, that's an example when I did listen. I was with all the sinking feeling that there were times when I didn't listen to. And I've forgiven me for those days where I didn't. If we truly desire to act in the way God desires us to act, and should we desire that, isn't that what we should be desiring? Then we need to be sensitive to His leading. We in some cases that means taking time and praying. I think about hearing someone say once that it's easy to rush into a bad decision, but God often takes time, and that means prayer in many cases. Well, at any rate, Paul listened to the Spirit, and he headed west to the shores of the Mediterranean. Eventually, we find him waiting at what was, if not, it is the furthest west seaport in Asia at this time. And there, we have a description of how God made history actually clear. This time, it's clear. Okay? During the night, Paul had a vision of a man of Macedonia standing and begging, "Come over to Macedonia and help us." After Paul had seen the vision, got ready at once to leave the Macedonians, concluding that God had called us to preach the gospel to them. I'm impressed. One of the things I'm impressed with in this section is that when God made clear what He wanted, you notice the Paul didn't hesitate either. It says that immediately at once they got together to leave. The other thing that I'm kind of just sort of signs on is that I try to think of sometimes is that Paul traveled with a group of people, Silas and Timothy and others. And in fact, this is the first reference in the Bible to Luke. This is the first time it says we. Right? So this is Luke entering in John and this point. Looking for myself sometimes, how many of others in that group must have a lot of us over it with spirits reading so out. I suspect it wasn't just Paul. I suspect the whole Europe probably had. Anyway, that's just my thinking, right? The next morning, it appears they cooked and packed up. They boarded a small wooden merchant ship waiting in the harbor with trolls. And as they cast off and set sail, John wondered. He told Stanley will get in this gently rocking boat here, watch the shore of Asia, passing, wondering if this and let God will ever bring them back that way again. He must have had some thoughts about Asia. But whatever the cost, Paul obeyed. Just that simple. That's what he's led. That's what he's born. He had the faith to follow the Spirit's leading. Now, later in the day, his ship, like almost all the ships of that time, stopped at this small island port of Samothrace. It's a Greek island. Because the last miles of the journey can be very, very treacherous. So captain will spend the day come in late, so they would go to get up the next morning, and in the daylight hours, they would finish off this difficult leg into the port that's called Intercultural in Greek. And that's the port that they were headed for. And I think to myself, and last evening, as he spent that was this final way station before stepping into a different port than he was familiar with, and a sense of anticipation what he had. We can assume that Paul knew that the road ahead would involve suffering in some fashion because it had everywhere else they had gone. But then we have to wonder how any missionary would feel on the last goal before they stepped into familiar. How did Hudson Taylor feel? He finally was ready to go. How did Dr. Robert Jeffrey, before he had the lot, even left whatever called headed up to racial field? Or Jim Elliot, who led to the Atlas? How did he feel at last stage? At last stage, as it's like, how did they feel? And they left behind everything, knowing that they were carrying the lost into the unknown region area. I suspect the only thing that would keep them going is their faith in God's leading. That's what would do it. Look at their willingness to spread the gospel. They change around more. And though God's leading, there will be results. Things will happen. In Paul's case, his faith and where he was being led resulted in the spread of Christianity to Europe. In fact, even after 2,000 years, it would be appropriate to suggest that Paul's efforts were part of what has resulted today. Largely through that part of the world, the Orthodox churches that have spread through Eastern and Central Europe down today. Now, I know that I'm not kidding myself. I know in evangelical circles, there's a tendency to be critical on the rights and traditions of that branch, Christianity, Orthodox. But I would challenge you with this. Jesus is still central in its theology. So let's just keep that straight. He is still straight, and that's part of Paul's heritage, or it's all part of what Paul brought to reach. For what we read, the question we have to train ourselves to ask is, where does the Spirit even need? I recognize that we're not all competent, but often it's initial to who knows where it's called us. But we are all called to support the missionary endeavor in some way, however large or small. I don't have to tell you, I think, with understanding the importance of missions is core to who we are as Alliance people. How is the Spirit guiding you and us to contribute mission? Have we listened for the Spirit and determined to just live our own life? If we haven't heard it, is it because we've too loud His voice? If we haven't done any time, we've faltered. But I worry about that because, friends, we have a lot of places in the world still need to share this to go out. And more, it seems like there's less and less, it seems like we've provided people to do that. Yeah, and it's rather modest. And anyway, let's get back to our story. So the next day in the afternoon, the Paul and his companions found themselves through the port and starting down a road called the Sea, we make sure that here's a picture of it. The great Roman lane that began at the airport and passed through Philippi to the foreign lands and to the north to Macedonia and Achaia, there to Crete to the Alps. And then, and you say to yourself, as they trudged up the range, and look what they've been, yes, have dinner. The ability to guess, I would suspect. Now, they ended up pouring a little bit of ways to the city of Philippi. The Philippi was a Roman colony city. And I really don't have time to explain what that means, nor would most of you probably be interested in hearing it anyway. It's just history. But you're a history freak like I, that means I enjoy the details, but I know that I don't want to drag you into the details. So, besides my wife, Amy, all I love Amy, the message is where she always gives me, which is, some of you, don't be boring. Don't be boring, she says. And it is worth knowing, though, that as a colony city, Philippi would have been populated by many retired Roman legionaries. It would have been organized and governed like a small world. Okay? Not like the Asian states. You had to govern Roman law and government structure, and you had the stern efficiencies and laws Roman government brought with it. And the official business was done in Latin, not Greek. Okay? By the way, that is the foreign, this that you're looking at the picture of, is the foreign Philippi. Further, it appears that there were very few, if any, Jews. Well, there were few, but not that many. And there was no synagogue. So then Paul couldn't start out his usual way of ministry. He had to invent a new way to start. And so he did it. Okay, I'm not going to go through a lot of that. There's many messages possible where Paul's encounter was a woman called Lydia. And then he was a slave girl possessed by a spirit. So they're very young. Paul and Silas and we don't know how many others, were arrested eventually because they offended the legacy of learning, this poor slave girl question. She was a girl that they used, the slave owners used to do fortune telling. And they used that to make money from people for they wouldn't listen to her. And there was a spirit in him that did this. And Paul just couldn't stand it anymore. Why didn't he said, banish the spirit? And that was not what those people wanted. And so they raised trouble for Paul and to his people when he cast the spirit out. When we read this, the crowd joined in the attack against Paul and Silas and the magistrates, ordered them to be stripped and being, after they had been severely flogged, they were thrown into prison, and the jailer was commanded to guard them carefully. He wanted to guard them carefully because, of course, as many of you know, if they got away, he replaced them. Okay, that was the way the law worked. You let a prisoner get away, you become the prisoner. Okay? Upon receiving such orders, he put them in the inner cell and fastened their feet to the stocks. They were probably beaten in the Roman bed with rods. And when this was over, they were thrown into prison. We actually have a prison there that's found at Philippi. So we get a sense of what truly looked like, and this is archaeological. A prison of that day was typically cut into a hillside or was built into a cave in a rock face. And there's no shortage of rock there. In fact, a prison was still this is exactly what this shows. One door leading in to the prison keepers and guards anteroom. So first door you went in, this is where the guards were. And then past that, there was another door leading from there into the prison itself. The prison keeper was usually an older, trusted soldier, after retired centurion. And when the prisoners were taken in, they were usually chained directly to the walls because there was no need, of course, there would have been no need for bars or cells because it was only one way out. Okay? No windows. Light only when the guards brought in a torch. A limited diet. Filthy water and moldy bread and finished. And think about what it would have been like in there. Smell of rotten food and kill and waste and permeate. The sound of prisoners groaning in pain and cursing their fate. The filthy floors, filthy from dried blood, bodily fluids. Detritus left by rats and roaches attracted by bodies dead and bodies not quite dead. Prisoners will be unexpected to last long. At least as prisons. Finally, you arrive at one of the great moments. Nice tour up in the attic. Great globe text. It was midnight. The darkest twilight of the night. Locked up at Babylon with the windows. Paul and Silas were stripped, bleeding from their open wounds, bruised and maybe even broken through the rods. As they lay on the filthy floor, with the ladies held wide apart by the stalks, so that they could either roll over or sit up. Their hands changed to the wall. Well, we see them there, and they say to themselves, what do we do in this place? Oh, and I have to say that I would probably whine and friendly. I wish I could crawl into a fetal position. These are times faith is required to face that God is still present, and face that wherever happens, God can still life. And then we read these amazing verses about midnight. Paul and Silas like praying and singing hymns to God, and the other Christians who were listening to them. Praying and singing hymns? Praying, I can see. Singing, playing down and praying, God, get me out of here, right? But singing hymns of, it just sounds suction, isn't it? Good here. By the way, as much as I try to avoid doing this is one of these times when I have to go back and look at the ancient Greek words to really understand. In English, we just see the word praying. And we try in many ways. In Greek, there are 4 common words used for pray. In each case, they imply a different type of prayer. The Greek word used by Luke, and remember, this is Luke writing here, and he is a precise, accurate, highly trained, literate scholar. in his own way. Okay? Luke uses a word that usually was prayers of adoration and praise. Adoration and praise. The not petitions, not prayers of sorrow or faith, praise. It would appear that they did not complain that God had let them down, but rather they exalted God for bringing them to this glory. You got to understand. I don't appreciate prayers of praise. Good. Prayers of praise. Yes, even in the darkest prison, the presence of Christ cannot be taken away from his followers. And what he must remain focused on the hope he provides. As hard as it is for me to imagine Paul and Silas praising in these circumstances, it fits what follows, and it fits what Paul later writes about. Years after, when he was later in prison again, in a letter back to this same church, when they're talking to him, Paul writes this. He says, I want to know Christ. Yes, to know the power of his resurrection and participation in his sufferings, including like him in his death, and it's so attaining to the resurrection. Not that I've already obtained all this, or already arrived at my goal. By Ursula to take honoring the fact which Christ Jesus called me. But to honest behind, pressing Lord. Paul saw participation in the suffering of Christ as a blessing rather than to be ignored. Interesting thought. And as we read up from the text, the suffering of the saints often led to the growth of the church. Sometimes amazing growth. As hard as suffering for Christ may be, it can lead to growth in our spiritual lives as well. And what was the effect of Paul and Silas singing? We go back to the other, as if we're listening to them. Well, I guess, again, this is where you walk in their sandals, and you say, how long was other praise? What the reaction in the church? I can see some of them saying, in sort of a sneering tone, saying, what do they have to be singing? They you might have been singing so loud that they kept the others from sleeping, which would cost pounds. But the other prisoners didn't even have school, Paul and Silas were about. But the other prisoners started to listen. They started to listen. And what did the word listening mean here? And again, we have to go back to look at so Greek. Well, this whole, one of the Greek scholars that I have had the chance to meet says this. He says, Luke chose a word that implies not just listening, but listening with joy, listening with delight. The Sid Page, his name that way. He said this verb is used mainly as to indicate pleasure in listening to a recitation or to listen to music. It's also a progressive verb, it's going on, it's continuing. So the prisoners were affected by what they heard. They thought they were only fighting. And they started to get the Russians, and I'm telling you what all the time should do. The faith of Paul and Silas, the faith in the face of the suffering, was effective in reaching into the hearts of the other prisoners and eventually to the jail. They were Christ believers. Regardless of the results of their praise and sin, we have to assume that Paul and Silas were greatly affected by the humiliation and the injustice pain they experienced. In some ways, this qualifies us to be called believers, praised. By praying and singing and praises in prison, they were using a time-tested method of responding to suffering. To get Paul's perspective again, let's look at the role of 5 things, 50 seconds. Listen to what he says. Therefore, since we've been justified through faith, we have peace with God through our Lord Jesus Christ, to whom we have gained access by faith into this grace in which we now stand. Here we go. And we boast in the hope of the glory of God. Not only so, but we are also glorying in our sufferings, because we know that suffering produces perseverance, character, And hope does not put us to shame, because God's love is poured out into our hearts through the Holy Spirit, who has been given to us. Again, we hear Paul's recognition of the significance of suffering that leads us to understand that faith will lead us through in following His heart. And this, my friends, is where I would like to really take it. You see, as I look around the church in the West today, I see a church that is in decline in many ways, probably many of them do too. I see a church, and we're talking about the West, right? So I can't wait another time, so I see a church that's increasingly losing its fire and its understanding of our faith. And I know you think I'm crazy for suggesting it, but I cannot help to wonder if it isn't partly because we've lost our willingness to suffer through our faith. I'm not talking about martyrdom necessarily, that's not what I'm talking about. But are we willing to suffer in many ways, such as being accused of being out of touch with reality, or being accused of being foolish, or being unscientific, or more upstairs one of the church teams, or being called bigoted because of a belief? And even if we don't, and we just keep silent, and we see things around us we shouldn't tweak out to. Please, I'm not talking about standing out some little placards, yelling obscenities at people, or because of what they do believe. That's not what we're talking about. What we're talking about is standing up with the name that's there and saying, no, we can't accept this. We live in a world that you know that encourages self-indulgence and is focused on fun, entertainment. This is what it's all about, right? Our world thinks that we should all have easy lives. It's our right to have easy lives. And I hear this word right being so. I heard one of my somewhere there in the middle of the heat thing. I heard somebody saying, I have a right air conditioner. But I thought twice, really? They had to know the right air conditioning and heat. You know, you've lost the complete understanding of what right rooms. But it all comes down to this: suffering is to be avoided at all costs. And so that's what our Lord teaches. You know, if we accommodate our religion to that, we will be lost. Our culture will be polluted by the Lord. We have to recognize that we are different. And because we are different, we will suffer in one fashion or another. It has to go, they go hand in hand, do they not? If you're going to be different, you better be prepared to suffer in some way or another. And again, let's be careful with this. I'm not talking about some of the things people would call suffering. So I'm talking about legitimate suffering in the sense of saying, this is what my faith stands for, this is what I wish to do, but doing it in gentleness and respect, with name rights. That suffering is part of what has resulted in the rise of churchable acts. And that promise that faith will, and now what do we have? We have churches that promise health and wealth and happiness, not suffering. That's going to lead us down a long path. That's not what Jesus proposed about. In fact, I will throw this verse up for you here because it says exactly what you expect of the Matthew. Blessed are you when people insult you, persecute you, and falsely say all kinds of evil against you because of me. Blessed are you. Rejoice and be glad, because great is your reward in heaven, for in the same way they persecuted the prophets who were before you. And that the one section is critical. What it does is it calls us to rediscover a theology of the gratefulness, the theology of suffering. Finality, true theology of suffering. Look, stuff that we see. Look at the anti-vaxxers who claim that they want to take vaccines because it's anti-Christian. Nonsense. That's not what we're talking. So, matter of fact, they're here a challenge. So, where the Bible say you should take vaccines? I'm going to show that to me. Like, break flagging. What chapter or verse? You can't make stuff up. It's church suffering for the sake of Christ is what we're talking here. But following Jesus is hard. What do we need to do? We need to rejoice and be glad because we have been promised a reward beyond the pennies, disappearing values of our worry, our honest principles, killing our mission for Jesus and our reward to come. Right, friends, that's effective sale. We will need to rediscover our theology of suffering in a proper way. If we're going to be different, we have to be with it. It's your steps.